Well, hello and welcome to Faith, Philosophy and Life. Me, Mr. Shelton. It's great to see you. And as always, I do hope you're doing well. We've got some quite difficult situations here that we're going to be thinking about over this half term. We're going to be thinking about situations and what people might do in them. And last half term we did a little unit on philosophy, which is basically why do people think there was a God and some of the issues surrounding evil and suffering. Well, today, this half term, we're going to be thinking about some big issues leading to medical ethics as well. So, situation number one. You're in a hurry to get home to your sick son. You've been stuck in a traffic jam. The road clears, so you could drive faster than the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. Do you? I want you to think about these 4 questions. How would the decision affect you? How would it affect your family and friends? How would the decision affect your community? And how would your decision affect the world? Have a think of that, because here's our cheesy intro music. Okay, so now you've listened to our rather nice new cheesy intro music theme, I just wonder what your reflection is on this. The thing is, if you broke the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit yourself, you might say it doesn't have a big impact on you, and the fact that you're a rule breaker, naughty naughty. Does it affect your family and friends? Well, in a positive way, possibly it does, because actually you're getting home to see your sick son. How does it affect the community? Well, it's saying that if you are willing to break the speed limit, then everyone else should be able to as well, and extenuating circumstances and the rest of it. And how does it affect the world? Well, it means basically that you're just going to ignore the law, and there's no point having the law. So if you're going to say that, then that begs the question about everything else that you might do or not do. So when we're thinking about some situations today, you've got to be thinking about some of these, how this works, basically. So our title today is, are there any right answers? Are there any correct answers? Any answers that are always the correct thing to do? So today we're going to explore situations which right and wrong could be relative and not absolute. Relative meaning that it could change depending on the situation. Absolute meaning that it's fixed every single time. As always, please do photograph your answers, send it through to us, because obviously we'd love to see your work. It's going to be good if you can suggest what you think would be the right or wrong thing to do in at least 2 situations. It's going to be great if you can suggest why someone else might disagree with you and why their viewpoint is what it is, and even better if we can suggest what consequences are less bad to challenging situations. During today's lesson then, we're going to look at some situations, you're going to look at some card sorts, some more situations, a media clip, and then I'd say a vote, but obviously we're doing this online, so maybe I won't be able to do it quite the same way that I would in a classroom. So to start off with, we need to define these terms. Relative, absolute. So grab your pen and see if you can work out now what you understand by the term relative and absolute. I've already given you a clue for that. So pause me now, give it a go, and come back to me. Okay, so a relative decision is one that changes depending on the situation. So do not kill, for example, might be a relative thing. If you're in a war and you kill someone, then you're breaking that rule. Therefore, that rule maybe isn't true in some situations, but is in others. Maybe lying's another good example. Someone says to you, do I look good wearing this dress? And you want to say no, but you realise that's going to cause offence. Maybe at that point lying would be okay, but lying to the police would be wrong. So relative then, and the other one is absolute. Absolute is where something is true in every single situation. So some people say do not murder is true, therefore they don't go to war. Therefore they would probably not eat any animals because do not murder, murder is wrong. So make sure you've got a definition of absolute and relative down, and then look at those bits in the green as well and see if you can come up with something for those. So pause me now and then come back to me. Okay, so what's right and wrong then? Okay, well, you need to have a definition of right and wrong. I can't give you one of those in case it's not correct. That's a joke for those of you that didn't get that. So something that's right is something that's correct or the best thing to do possibly. Something that's wrong is something that may cause injury or harm to someone else. Who decides what's right and wrong? Well, there's $1 million question. Is it the law? Is it the police? Is it your conscience? Is it the church? Is it religious teachings? I don't know. But you might have some ideas on that. And finally, who helps us work out what's right and wrong? I've just given you a whole list of things there. Abraham Lincoln said this: no one has the right to choose to do what is wrong. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, one of the founding people of the United States of America. No one has the right to choose to do what is wrong. Interesting that. Do you disagree with that? So maybe take a moment, pause again, and write your response to that. Maybe write the quote down and write your response to if you agree with this statement or not and say why. Come back to me in a minute. Okay, so we looked at one of these situations earlier. I've got a second one here for you, maybe a little bit more controversial. You've interviewed 3 people for a job. Everyone has the same qualifications. The best candidate is a man, but it's an all-female office and you're not sure if he'll fit in. Do you give him the job? Okay, again, I want you just to think this through. I'm not asking you to write anything down for this, but I want you to think through those 4 questions that we talked about earlier. Do you offer this man the job, or do you let it slide? Yes, that would possibly be very illegal, but you might argue that he might not stick the job anyway, because he might not be made to feel very comfortable. Anyway, I'm not going to give you any more hints on that. I want you to have a look at that. I want you to think about that, and then come back to me. Okay, I wonder what you did. I would never know. Unless you want to drop an email to me or your teachers, and I'd be interested. So, we said this lesson would explore situations in which right and wrong could be relative and not absolute. And already, maybe you've been thinking about some of those things. We said it'd be good if you could suggest what you think could be the right or wrong thing to do in at least 2 situations. Now, actually, we've already achieved that, which is great. But what I want to do is I want to really drill into that. In the description below, you will find a list there. You can see it above my shoulder. You will see a list of things, situations maybe. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to choose 2 or 3 of those. Write them out in your book and write down what you would do. Simple as that. So have a look at those. Choose 2 or 3 of them. Write them down. Chop them out if you've got a printer and you want to print them off. And write down what you would do in that situation. So pause me now and then come back to me. Okay, here's another one, quite like this one. Roger Smith, lovely name, is quite a competent swimmer. He does the job very well. He's out for a leisurely stroll. During the course of his walk, he passes by a deserted pier, from which a teenage boy, who apparently cannot swim, has fallen into the water. The boy screaming for help. Smith recognises there's absolutely no danger to himself. If he jumps in, he could save the boy. And he would easily succeed as well. Nevertheless, though, he chooses to ignore the boy's cries. Shocking. The water is cold and he's afraid of catching a cold. He doesn't want to get his clothes wet either. Why should I inconvenience myself with this kid, Smith says to himself and passes on. So there's 2 questions here for you to write a response to in your book. Does Smith have a moral obligation to save the boy? In other words, should he do it? Okay, does he have a responsibility to do it because he can do it? And if so, should he have a legal obligation? So, for example, in some countries, not in the England, but in some countries, there are Good Samaritan laws, which are where you must help somebody out in the case of a serious accident. You are not allowed just to go past and ignore them. So, two questions there. Does Smith have a moral obligation to save the boy? And should he have a legal obligation either? Should it be set in the law? So pause me now and have a look at that and put a response together, maybe just a short paragraph of what you think and why. And some of you might even stretch yourself and try and write an opposite viewpoint as well. Pause me now. Okay, so lastly then, really interesting one, this one. You'll see this list behind me. It's also in the description below if it's not very clear on your screen. I want you to think about which ones of these are not acceptable and which ones are okay. Now, you could do this by simply printing it off and shading boxes. You could do this as writing them out into two columns. You could do them as just making a few notes if you would rather, if you don't have access to a printer. The key thing is that you can do is that you can explain why you've chosen what you've chosen. Now, you know how much more time of this lesson you have got left. So this is probably going to take you the vast majority of your time. Now, there is another sheet on there that could be done for homework. That's someone who wants to steal some genes or do something about that anyway. We have really done really well with these objectives today, and we've thought about consequences. We've been looking at situations, we've been talking about what is our duties, what's absolute, what's relative. So I'd like you to have a look at that, work through that now, do as many as you can, certainly identify which ones you would think acceptable and which ones are not. If you don't have, as I say, a printer, then I'm sure you can get that down under two columns, and you don't have to write them all out. Obviously, you can shrink them down, but make sure that you're able to explain a few of those as well. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Thanks very much for your time. Take care of yourself, stay safe, wash hands, God bless you, and I'll see you next week for some more mind teasers.